Hello and welcome to the show. My guest today is from Turkey, where she studied political science and international relations in Istanbul, then went to the US to work at the United Nations and later studied for a doctorate at the Columbia Law School. Dilek Kurban is now a leading political analyst and a Mercator IPC fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs based here in Berlin. She's also contributed to a number of books on human rights, minority groups and on media freedom in Turkey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, the German Institute for International and Security Affairs is a think tank. Now, what exactly does it do, though?
It is a publicly funded, supported policy research center. And it does, the German acronym is SWP, Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik, and it does research, policy-oriented research, to advise the German parliament and the German government on foreign policy issues.
And you're Turkish, and you're at this institute. Is it a very international crowd there, or is it mostly Germans who are working there?
It's the latter. It's hardly international. But that's natural because they advise the German government and the parliament in German. So everyone is German speaking and mostly German. I'm a Mercator fellow there, and this is a new program, this fellowship, which will support 2 fellows every year who work on Turkey. So from now on, there will be a few fellows every year at the institute, but it is a German institute.
Yeah, you mentioned there Mercator. What exactly is that? A Mercator IPC fellow?
Well, that's a combination. There are 2 names. So Mercator is a foundation in Germany.
Yeah.
IPC stands for, that's the Mercator Foundation. IPC stands for Istanbul Policy Center, which is a think tank in Istanbul, Turkey. And this is a joint fellowship supported by these 2 institutions, funded by Mercator, to have research fellows at SWP in Berlin.
And do you have a speciality there?
Well, I do my own, yes,
Yeah.
yes. But you know, they support independent research. So the fellows apply, candidates apply with their own research project. And if and when they're approved, accepted, then they conduct their own research. So I have my own, yes.
Yeah. What is your specialty?
Well, it's really continuation of my prior work. And at the moment, I'm writing on the impact of the European institutions on Turkey's Kurdish policy.
Okay. Let's go back to your childhood. I obviously want to ask your opinions about your home country and your opinions about Germany, but right back to your roots. You were born in Istanbul, but you're the youngest,
yes.
And you're the only one of your family, I believe, actually, that was born in Istanbul.
Yes.
And the family comes from Eastern Turkey?
Yes, from a village, a small remote village in the province of Bingöl, which is in Eastern Turkey. That's my father's village.
And come from a very poor background, I believe. I mean,
yeah, actually, yes.
I mean, how poor was it? I mean, obviously you weren't there, but I know you know. I mean, you lost. I mean, there was 4 brothers that never lived beyond childbirth, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, actually, infant-child mortality was very common and natural in not just in the Kurdish region, but in rural Turkey at the time. And when I look at my family, it's not just my mother and my father, who, as you said, lost 4 sons, 4 children, but virtually all of my uncles, aunts, both grandmothers, great aunts, everyone. It was just a part of life, and that was because there was no hospital, basically no health facilities, not even a clinic, in our village or in the neighboring villages. There were no roads, and there was hardly any vehicle sort of going by to connect the villages to the city center. Our village was covered by snow for 6-7 months a year, and this is really sort of covered. And it was virtually impossible for sick kids, babies, to be taken to see a doctor. My parents, I mean, I wouldn't say that my grandfather was poor. Actually, in relative terms, he was better off compared to the other peasants. He had cattle, he had a large number of animals. He owned the land. But it was just an impoverished area. So everyone, irrespective of the number of kettles they had no running water, no electricity. There was no toilet in the house.
But your father left and went to Istanbul to
Yes.
try and get a better life for his children. You followed on later. We've got a lovely picture from you here I'd like to start with. But here you are. Are you starting your career as a public speaker? Is that a microphone? No.
Well, yeah, it was
pretend microphone.
Yeah, it was a cord of the radio that I was using as a microphone. In fact, I was singing. So I aspired to be a singer, but I really cannot sing. So then I settled for being a public speaker, I guess.
Okay. And one more, but this is more the family. This is mum and dad?
Yeah, and then my sister next to me
Yeah.
and my niece. This was in 2006 or so.
And that's more recently in Istanbul as well?
This was in Istanbul, yeah. I think that was the Mother's Day that we were celebrating. My brother was not there.
Yeah. And I believe when you were growing up in Istanbul, you had to sort of hide your identity from your fellow students at school. Why was that?
I mean, I felt...
Sorry, not identity as name, but...
no, identity, in fact. I felt, I felt as a child... The thing is, children in general don't want to be different, right? They don't want to stand out. That goes for, I think, any child, say, for example, a child whose parents are divorced, where no one else's is. And in my case, growing up, I sensed that we were different. My parents were speaking Kurdish at home, although everyone else at school or in the neighborhood were speaking Turkish. They were not fasting in Ramadan when everyone else was fasting. So I sensed we were different. And of course, growing up, I realized what the difference was, and that is ethnically, we're Kurdish, and religiously we belong to the Alevi minority in Turkey, who are basically a non-Sunni Muslim community who don't fast in Ramadan, for example. And I was extremely ashamed of both of that.
And I believe when you revealed your identity to your friends, some of them were quite upset, in fact, in a good way.
Yeah,
They were sort of annoyed.
Yeah, they were upset that they took it as a sign of my distrust in our friendship and in their love for me. They found it difficult to understand why I did not so.
And they had nothing against the Alevis then, themselves?
No, not my friends. I mean, I was very privileged, But, growing up at school, for example, I would often hear derogatory remarks from other students who are not my friends or even teachers. So, you don't want to... children always want to be loved and included, and I didn't want to be excluded.
Yeah. OK. Now, let's find out a little more about the history of the Alevis.
It's estimated that there are between 10 and 15 million Alevis in Turkey. They are the second biggest minority after the Kurds and the second largest religious community after the Sunnis. The Muslim Sunni majority in Turkey has for centuries looked upon the Alevis with a certain amount of suspicion and prejudice. Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called the 10 million Alevis in the country his brothers. But he's also said that their distinct rituals are dividing society.
There's only one place for Muslims to go and pray, right? That's the mosque. I don't have anything against their cultural centers. But when Muslims go to different places to pray, that creates divisions in society.
The idea of men and women dancing together in a place of worship is unimaginable to some Muslims. Alevis sing songs and recite poetry while worshipping. Their perspective is essentially humanistic and less dogmatic. They worship Ali, son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. Men and women are symbolically equal, which they show by washing each other's hands.
The Creator made both man and woman out of a drop of water. If that's how He sees it, then why shouldn't we treat women equally?
For radical Sunnis, such sentiments amount to heresy. That's why Alevis generally keep their traditions and songs to themselves. But since the outbreak of the war in Syria, life has been made more difficult for Turkish Alevis. This is because Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite, a related sect which also worships Ali.
The Alevis fear that this will intensify the signification of the atmosphere and the language in Turkey and around. So, although I personally think it is wrong to support Assad on political grounds, I can also understand the concerns that Turkey's Alevis have.
This is just one of the problems facing Alevis in Turkey today. As their voice strengthens, it's becoming clear that the Kurds aren't the only discontented minority in the country.
My guest is Dilek Kurban, who works for the German Institute for International and Security Affairs here in Berlin. You talk about being an Alevi and a Kurd. Is that what really got you interested in what you do, in human rights, in minority groups? Is that what started you off?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Certainly. Because, you know, when you are a member of minority yourself, your sort of antennas are open to, you know, equalities, injustice and discrimination. You grow up in it, being aware of the unequal treatment of some groups by the majority and the state.
Let's talk about Turkey today, because the new president is the old prime minister. It seems to me to be all about Erdogan. Is he too powerful now?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Is he becoming another Putin, for instance? I mean...
Yeah, it looks like it, and he actually aspires to be one. He said it publicly on record that Turkey should be part of the Shanghai 5, now 6, which Russia is a part of. You know, he's close friends with Putin, and I mean, he wants to be very powerful without being accountable.
But why is... I mean, there's no real opposition to him, it seems. I mean, he got 52% in the presidential election. That's the highest percentage yet. He's never been so popular. Why is this? I mean, he must be doing something right. I don't know.
Well, of course, he has done things right. Certainly at the beginning of his government 10 years ago. I mean, he's led a sort of a political change transition process in Turkey, which, of course, is the outcome of decades of struggle by minority groups, human rights community, etc., and as a result also of significant EU pressure. But he deserves the credit that he should take on this. The problem is that he has just turned into, one of the... He likes power and he doesn't want to give it up. Part of it has to do with the fact that it seems like he's also done not so good deeds and not so lawful things such as corruption, and I think part of it is panic of losing power and then getting into trouble by being prosecuted. But as for your question, in terms of there's no opposition against it. There's this sort of psychological feeling in Erdogan and his constituency that they're still not ruling Turkey, that there are all these forces, although he has electoral base, that there are all these domestic and international forces who are trying to bring him down. I mean, certainly there's democratic opposition in the country who want to bring an end to its government, but that's that democracy. I mean, that's very natural, isn't it? Yeah,
but I noticed in the report about the Alevis, the equality of men and women, which isn't throughout Turkish society. I mean, presumably half the population is female. One of his politicians said some time ago that women should not laugh out loud in public. I mean, this being said in today's world is terrible. I mean, surely no women vote for him then?
Well, they do, and that's the contradiction. Well, I mean, what he said was, I guess when you asked to sort of the devout Muslim, community, to women in that community, some people will say, well, he didn't really mean that, and some people will say, yes, actually, that's true. Women shouldn't, dress revealing clothes, etc. But leaving aside the rhetoric, what really disconcerts me more is the policies of the government, and they've actually implemented policies harming women's rights, such as abortion, for example. They tried to limit. A couple of years ago, the government tried to limit the abortion right, which has never been an issue in Turkey. Women in Turkey had the right to abortion for a long time, since 1982 or 3. It has never been an issue of public debate. And the Erdogan government tried to restrict that. Now, they failed, but then when you look at the practice in the public hospitals, you see now that the doctors are, especially the doctors who, sort of are themselves devout Muslims, or, they want to be nice to the government. For whatever reason, they refuse to do abortion unless absolutely necessary to save the life of women. And there are many other examples of that. And of course, as a woman, I find that extremely disconcerting, and many women do that.
What about the Kurdish situation? He seems to have had some success there, because it doesn't seem to have been in the press so much. It seems to have quietened down. He seems to have placated the Kurds.
Yes, I mean, that's one area where you can say, you can give his government more credit. Certainly there has been, the Kurds now they have some linguistic rights. They can learn their mother tongue in schools, for example, at universities, in high school. There's public broadcasting in Kurdish, etc. So these are all the works of this government. And the peace talks have started with the PKK's imprisoned leader, Öcalan. Having said that, a couple of things. First, this, of course, was also the result of a sort of decades-old struggle, political and human rights struggle of the Kurds themselves, which made this possible. The EU, the European factor, also plays a role. At least initially, it has played a role, and there are also the reforms are done in a very piecemeal fashion, which is very typical of all governments in Turkey, not just this one. For example, the Kurds now learn their languages, but when a politician speaks Kurdish in a political party congress, that can still be a ground for the dissolution of that political party. That's still in the laws. So it's, Yeah,
but progress is being made. Let's talk about the relationship between Turkey and Germany, which obviously you're involved with. And I should point out here, for those people who don't know, there's a huge Turkish community here in Germany. There's alone in Berlin, there are 200,000 people with Turkish immigrant background. And you mentioned there the EU. It's the question of whether Turkey gets membership of the European Union has been going on for so long, and it's almost. Is it over now? Is it forgotten, do you think? Is it never going to happen?
I don't think it's going to happen. Turkey's membership to the EU will not happen for many reasons. EU is in a crisis. Anyhow, the future of EU is very uncertain, and certainly Turkey there are a lot of domestic issues in Turkey that makes it not deserve to be a member. And it's also too huge for the EU to absorb. There are cultural and religious reservations on the part of some EU member states or policymakers. So there are many reasons that it's not going to happen. But what's really important is for the EU process to continue, for there be a process going on. And that has halted a couple of years ago, and that's a problem.
I know you're sceptical. You seem to be sceptical about the future of the EU. Do you think it's going to break up?
As a Brit. No, but you're from Britain, right? There are. I think the EU will continue, but the question is, of course, in what form, in what strength. It's going to be a smaller union with a sort of smaller but integrated and strong union, or it'll stay large but not so powerful. That remains to be seen.
Or perhaps two grades of union.
Yeah.
Is that possible, do you think? What's going to happen with the money, with the euro? Does Germany get a strong euro and a few other countries, and then the other?
Well, that's actually some of the proposals.
Yeah,
there's some people are saying, okay, let's just have tracks. Those who want the euro and the Schengen and common foreign policy, let them do that, and those that don't, let them stay out. It's. But it is, of course, for me, for someone from Turkey, the fact that all of these discussions are absolutely not followed in Turkey says also something about how introvert we are. People in Turkey, the government, are pretty much clueless in a way about these internal debates in the EU. And in that sense, it's really long forgotten because no one really cares about the EU anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I said you came here to work at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. You did actually come here for another reason, and I'll just put up this picture. I think this is absolutely gorgeous. This is a lovely wedding photo. Yeah, tell us about that. Where are you there, for instance?
This is our wedding last summer in Büyükada. It's one of the Princess Islands in Istanbul.
Uh-huh.
And we've just left the hotel, accompanied by an amazing Roma band. And we walked down the streets of Büyükada to the harbor to take the boat, which took us to the bay where our guests were waiting for us.
And you came to Berlin for love as well, but actually he's not German.
Yes, he's Dutch, and that's the main reason why I moved to Turkey, to Germany. Love, indeed. He's Dutch.
And this leads me nicely on to, you have here, you live here in Berlin, but you also have, in Berlin, a rather special place that you two have on an island. Tell us about that.
Well, this is it's called Reiswerde. It's on one of the lakes, the Tegelsee, in Berlin. And we have a little, what's called Laube, a small cottage, really. And it's actually the reason why we're there is because we wanted to find a place to put our boat.
Yeah. Okay. Well, don't tell us any more
right.
Because let's see it. We're very flattered that you showed us your secret hideout, so to speak. And we're very grateful to the lovely community of Reiswerde for letting us film there. But first we go to a square here in Berlin where you work.
The Ludwig-Kirch-Platz near to her workplace is one of Dilek's favorite places in the German capital.
Charlottenburg is it's an old, affluent neighborhood of Berlin. And it's nice to work here because the square is really nice and green. There are always, children playing around and old people, and there are always, as everywhere in Berlin, people sitting in cafes at any time of the day, which I always wonder how that happens.
Dilek has a fellowship that supports her academic research at one of the most influential foreign policy think tanks in Germany.
So I'm basically doing my independent academic research at SVP. And my research is about the impact of the European institutions on Turkey's Kurdish policies.
Dilek has found a perfect place to get away from it all when she's not working. Just 25 minutes from the city center, Dilek's oasis of calm is a tiny island called Reiswerde in the middle of Lake Tegel.
We are at Tegelsee. Berlin is full of lakes, and that's one of the most beautiful things about it. And I really like the Tegelsee because there are many islands on it, and there's a lot of traffic, sea traffic. There are always boats and sailing boats, rowing boats, which reminds me a little bit of Istanbul. I think because in Istanbul we have the sea, the Bosphorus, and there's always traffic there.
Much more than here for sure. The little ferry that serves Reiswerde comes just once every hour. But for Dilek, waiting is not a problem. Especially today, she is not just waiting for the ferry. Her family arrives just in time to hop on board and be taken across the water to a different world. Husband Ruud played a big role in Dilek's move to Berlin. They also took over a very simple dacha on the island, in part to have a home for a prized family heirloom.
That's actually the reason why we actually thought about getting a place on this island, because my husband inherited a boat from his father, which was sitting in Amsterdam, the boat. We wanted to bring it to Berlin, and then we've heard about this place from a friend. So while looking for a home for our boat, we found a home, also sort of a second home for ourselves in Berlin.
A second home that somehow reminds her of her family in Turkey and the little village where her parents lived.
I mean, I'm exaggerating. I tell my mother too sometimes. I say, yeah, Mom, there's no running water. I also have to pump it. And we laugh about it. But they really, that was a remote village where people lived in very difficult circumstances. But yeah, I like to believe that it's a sort of a glimpse of that. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we didn't say before the film began, that is actually in Berlin, but it's like in the middle of the country, really, because there's no or very little electricity, just solar electricity and things. And I should at this point show this picture of what was your family house in Turkey, your grandfather's house, I believe, which is now a ruin, but indeed that was where you were talking about earlier on in the programme.
Yes, and that's where my grandfather and the extended family lived until 1994, when they were forcefully evicted by the Turkish security forces.
Yeah, yeah. And it's since then fallen to ruin.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
But we still have it. We still own the land, you know.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. The ownership is in the family.
Would you like to go back there and build on it? And
my sister is dreaming about it. She wants to raise walnut trees and, you know, have a weekend house for all of us. Yeah, we would love to.
Now, you're not a member of the Turkish community here, but your first impressions of Germany as a teenager, I believe, were of Turkish immigrant workers, the guest workers, the famous guest workers in Germany, coming back. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think you didn't get a very good impression.
Well, I mean, everyone in my generation had, you know, knew some sort of guest workers in their neighborhood or extended family. I actually have cousins here in Germany and in France who moved here as guest workers. In Turkish, there is actually a derogatory word used for them. They're called Almancı. Alman means German. Almancı is like a Germanite. It's not a very positive, you know, connotation. When I was a child, you know, there was we didn't have sort of market economy in Turkey yet, not really, and certain things were not available, like Adidas, Nike, etc. And the guest workers would come to Istanbul, to Turkey in summer to visit their families, and they would have these. They would be driving Mercedes and, you know, wear these expensive sneakers that we didn't, you know, have. So we would, I think, society would, on one hand, envy them for, you know, what they had, but also look down upon them in a way, and that continues still, not the envy part.
And what was your impression of Germany then, from that? That was your impression of Germany, or, you know, they've got all these things. What did you think of Germany? Do you remember?
As I was a small child?
Yeah.
Not really. No. I think just, I guess, a faraway country where, you know, there are nice Jews. Okay. I don't know.
But then later on, you had a German boyfriend.
I did, yeah.
How did you meet him?
Oh, in, you know, holidays in Turkey. But I did, then I started visiting, you know, Germany. But that was more, and then I started to get to know, you know, Germany a little bit, and loved it, of course. I mean, it's a great country.
But the first place, and you lived in Germany, first of all, in Flensburg.
In Flensburg,
which is up in the north.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Well, I mean, that was also yet another fellowship. After I graduated from Columbia Law School, I was awarded a research fellowship. And there's a research center on minority issues there in Flensburg. It's on the Danish border, and actually from the office, you can literally see Denmark. It's a small, you know, very small town. I stayed there for 3 months. I loved it. First because I had a Schengen visa, which, you know, is a privilege for a Turk to have.
Which means, well, it means you can travel around.
Yeah,
Europe,
freely, without having to, you know, I had it for 3 months, and I visited my friends, you know, all over Europe, except, of course, UK. And it was a great, you know, I did my research. It was nice. But, of course, it's only nice for a small stay.
And then you went back to Turkey to a job, I believe. Tell us about that.
Well, I worked for 8 years at a think tank, at a very sort of well-known leading think tank in Turkey. The Turkish acronym is called TESEV. And I worked there on democratization and minority issues in Turkey. I was very much part of this sort of reform process, doing research and policy work. Is that
to do with that? There you are.
Yeah.
Where are you there, actually?
This is in a village in the Kurdish province of Batman. And I am I'm interviewing actually the displaced Kurds who were displaced in the 90s, like my family, and who've now returned to their village. So this is in a village where there's been some return. And together with colleagues, I've conducted research for a couple of years on the social, political and legal problems of the displaced people.
And how was it? I mean, I ask because Turkey is still quite a patriarchal society. There you are interviewing men. How did they react to a woman in their midst coming to interview them about this?
Yeah, that was never an issue. No? That was never an issue. And the thing is, I mean, maybe that's common. I don't know how common that is, a common trait, but they had, because the displaced Kurds in general, but especially the displaced Kurds, have never really been, I should say never, but they haven't had the opportunity to tell their stories, to tell their grievances, the human rights atrocities that they faced, the injustice that they faced. So when they meet someone, a researcher, a politician, an activist, who asks them what happened to you, they want to talk. Doesn't matter if you're a woman or not. Okay. It was just a non-issue.
Okay.
And they shared their stories with us generously, which in fact actually was the first time that I heard the displaced tell their stories of displacement. And it was actually in Batman in 2005 that I realized that I've never asked my own grandfather and my uncle and my cousins about their displacement story.
Did you go on to do that?
Yes, then we also interviewed my grandfather in Istanbul as part of our field work, and my aunt and my cousins. I have the voice recording. Later, my grandfather passed away, but I felt so good to do that. And then I realized, of course, it's sort of like a circle being completed, because I went to law school, I studied human rights, to do something about to sort of save the Kurds in a way. Yeah. And then in the end, got the story of my own family.
And you were doing that until you came to Germany in 2012?
Yeah, and I'm still working on, displacement issues, not doing field work anymore. But I've also I've also conducted field work on other minorities in Turkey, the Christians, for example, the Assyrians, the Greek Orthodox, the Jewish, and the Armenian minorities concerning their property rights issues.
Now, here you are in Germany. There's one man I know who took a great part in post-war history here, and you named as your favourite German in our questionnaire, the Chancellor in the 60s, Willy Brandt. Oh, you named him actually as the coolest German, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. So why?
Well, I mean, of course, the first thing is this very famous act, the silent act he's done in 1970 when he kneeled down in Warsaw, in memory of the Jewish victims of the uprising, the ghetto uprising in Warsaw. And I just find that extremely courageous and humble act for a human person anyway, but especially for a political leader.
Okay.
I just find him so... in Turkey, we grew up with denial of the past and utter denial of the injustices, etc. And I cannot imagine a political leader in Turkey kneeling down in memory of past victims. And I just think it's a very cool thing to do.
A great man, but a man who polarised opinion sometimes as he stuck very much to his principles.
Willy Brandt, political icon, fisher of men, conciliator, visionary.
We dare to want greater democracy.
To some, he was a trailblazer of a politics of global peace. To others, he was a traitor to the fatherland. Savior of the Social Democrats and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. But he was also a lonely, vulnerable, pensive person.
He's one of the two men who substantially influenced our post-war history. I think that made a big impression on me. To not assume that someone who thinks differently in a fundamental way, is either stupid or malicious. Rather, to consider that you could be wrong yourself. The reconciliation with the East, of course. And that he was the first Social Democrat chancellor after World War II. And that there aren't any people like him anymore. Willy Brandt was a politician who stood up for something and who didn't change his policies when the poll numbers were down, but fought for his policies. Brandt decided that if you believe something is necessary, you have to do it. Better to go down waving the flag than on your knees.
In 1969, the SPD and the Free Democrats had a narrow victory in the polls and formed a coalition. Willy Brandt became the first Social Democrat Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. Brandt's SPD captured the zeitgeist and was more successful than ever. He was the first German head of government to visit East Germany. The people in Erfurt welcomed him enthusiastically. It became his goal to defuse the conflict between the East and the West. On a visit to Poland in December 1970, he signed the Treaty of Warsaw. And at the memorial to victims of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, he unexpectedly knelt down, a symbol of his politics of reconciliation.
It was a momentary instinct that moved him to make a gesture with which he, who personally bore no guilt, asked for forgiveness for the guilt of his people. And it was that moment that then won him the Nobel Peace Prize.
Brandt the reformer sparked West Germans' enthusiasm for democracy. The SPD was the leading party for years.
And I like about him the fact that he also said at various times in his career that, you know, I've made mistakes and I admit I was wrong about this, or he said it. And that's rare in a politician, perhaps. Yeah.
Humility.
Yes, indeed. That brings us very nicely to our questionnaire, because you say a good German characteristic is not only Willy Brandt.
No.
Why? Why humility?
I find the Germans quite humble. You know, the Germans are not. You know, you meet even, you know, so no matter how successful a person may be in his or her, you know, career, how well established, etc. You know, you don't see ego like that. I find them just humble and easygoing. You know, yeah, I guess that's what it is. You know, they're very. They don't show off, and you can't really see that sort of high egos, I guess.
Yeah, that links up also with. You put under something the Germans do extremely well. Can you say this word?
Yeah.
It's one of those German words that's just this long.
It's incredible. Vergangenheitsbewältigung, oder?
I've got it in front of me, I have to say. It's unfair, really, on you. Vergangenheitsbewältigung, which... How can we translate this? The process of coming to terms with the past is a serious subject, of course. Yeah. And we're talking about with regard to the Holocaust, really. Yeah. I mean, your opinions?
I just find that, you know, there are these, and the German word for that I always forget too, but there are these sort of small yellow stones that you see in front of door fronts everywhere. And that I find, you know, they are in memory, each stone, each of these cobblestones is in the memory of one identified Jewish victim of the Holocaust.
The Stolperstein.
Stolperstein, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, you look at it and you have it. The person's name, when he or she was born, where he or she was deported to, and if the date of death is known, when he or she died. Every time in your day-to-day life, going to the market or going out to dancing, to work, you just pass through these, and then every time I stop. And it just takes, I think it's a very powerful and very effective way of remembering the past and reminding that. And I just find it extraordinary, really.
Yeah, no, I do as well. They're extraordinary things. Most annoying German.
Oh, Jörgilo,
This man is a saint. Germany won the World Cup.
Oh, but that doesn't change the fact that he's very annoying. I just find him, he's just too full of himself. You know, every time the camera, how can someone always be posing? He never smiles. He's always in this sort of like perfect, you know, position. And I find him, speaking of ego, he has an extremely high ego and he's always posing.
I'm sure you've been influenced by your husband.
Actually, yes. Actually, yes. No, but I mean, every time I see it, he never smiles.
Okay, fair enough.
How can anyone not smile?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. We'll move on from there because he's obviously a bit of a hero at the moment.
With all due respect.
Now, yes, best thing about living in Germany. We're nearly at the end.
Oh, yes. Well, how I put it was like this, to be able to ride a bike with a miniskirt. I mean, that symbolizes freedom, and especially individual freedom as a woman, and that's something that you just don't have in Turkey, you know?
We've almost run out of time. Finally, you're here on a fellowship, 1 or 2 years. So what's next for Dilek Kurban? Following Willy Brandt in politics, perhaps? I don't know.
Well, I mean, here I can't do it. In Turkey, no, politics, I've never been interested in politics. But, you know, for me, research is also a way of activism. You know, that's also one way of doing politics, I think.
OK, we wish you all the best in your future career.
Thank you.
It's been fascinating talking to you. Dilek Kurban, thanks very much.
Thank
you for joining us. If you'd like to write to the show, please do so. insight@dw.de. We love to hear your opinions. There's been a lot of opinions from Dilek today on the show. Jürgen Löw. We're going to get so much post. But no, we do love to hear from you, and please write to us if you can. That's it for Insight Germany today. Until next time, bye-bye.